Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent attends Supreme Court arguments on President Trump's global tariffs, what he and President Trump think about the case.
On Capitol Hill, bipartisan talks are underway. Is a breakthrough coming in the government shutdown? One Democrat says extremism and political violence have driven him to leave office.
The FAA says it's preparing to cut 10% of flights across 40 airports as the government shutdown drags on. Why the agency says it's making these cuts.
Several firefighters were injured after a car exploded in the Bronx. How a trash fire spread out of control, sending 3 firemen to the hospital.
The NTD and the Epoch Times were blocked from covering key Asia summits, raising new questions about the Chinese Communist Party's influence over international institutions.
And here in the U.S., with rising life expectancy, volatile markets, and inflation lurking, turning your 401k or a savings into sustainable income streams has never been more crucial. And we're going to speak with a financial advisor for strategies to help you stay the distance.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Great to have you with us.
Today's Thursday, November 6th. You're watching NTD Good Morning. So good to have you here. In today's top news, President Trump's tariffs. We're at the top of the Supreme Court's oral arguments yesterday.
Yeah, that's right. The justices were peppering the government Solicitor General with questions about the president's power to impose these global tariffs. NTD's Arlene Richards explains both sides of the case.
The Trump administration's Solicitor General defended the president's power to impose global tariffs on Wednesday before a skeptical panel of Supreme Court justices.
On April 2nd, President Trump determined that our exploding trade deficits had brought us to the brink of an economic and national security catastrophe. He further pronounced that the traffic of fentanyl and other opioids into our country has created a public health crisis, taking hundreds of thousands of American lives. President Trump has declared that these emergencies are country-killing and not sustainable, that they threaten the bedrock of our national and economic security, and that fixing them will make America a strong, financially viable, and respected country again.
A handful of small businesses in 12 Democratic states have accused the president of overstepping his authority by imposing global tariffs where the law doesn't allow it. They maintain that only Congress has the power to regulate tariffs.
Tariffs are taxes. They take dollars from Americans' pockets and deposit them in the U.S. Treasury. Our founders gave that taxing power to Congress alone. Yet here, the president bypassed Congress and imposed one of the largest tax increases in our lifetimes. Many doctrines explain why this is illegal, like the presumption that Congress speaks clearly when it imposes taxes and duties, and the major questions doctrine. But it comes down to common sense. It's simply implausible that in enacting IEEPA, Congress handed the president the power to overhaul the entire tariff system and the American economy in the process.
The justices are concerned about the Trump administration's regulation of tariffs globally, with several justices questioning whether he properly interpreted the statute in question. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And after our arguments wrapped up, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent posted on X praising Solicitor General John Sawyer's defense, calling it strong and persuasive.
That's right. He said the administration's use of the tariffs is essential to rebalance decades of unfair trade against the U.S., adding, quote, economic security is national security. He said the plaintiff's arguments reflected a foundational misunderstanding of the Trump administration's trade goals.
And the Trump administration is saying it's optimistic after attending the Supreme Court arguments on President Trump's global tariffs.
Yeah, and the president spoke to business leaders in Miami yesterday, reacting to Tuesday's election results. NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu brings us more.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is saying that he's very optimistic about the Supreme Court case that's considering the legality of President Trump's global tariffs. Bessent attended the arguments, and he said that the Solicitor General presented, quote, strong and persuasive arguments. Bessent also claimed that the plaintiff's arguments fundamentally misunderstood and misrepresented the goal of President Trump's tariffs. And here's the president himself commenting on the case. Watch.
Well, I heard the court case went well today, but it'd be devastating for our country if we lost that. You know, that wasn't a threat against us. That was a threat against the entire world. I did this for the world. And I can guarantee you this. If I didn't put 100% tariff immediately on China, the entire world would be closed up.
Every camera, every iPhone here would have been subject to a Chinese control. Because he had the ability to threaten 100% tariff, he was able to successfully execute on foreign policy.
President Trump has repeatedly emphasized that without his tariffs, there would be no national security. And meanwhile, President Trump reacting to Republican losses on election night with a focus on New York City's new mayor-elect.
After last night's results, the decision facing all Americans could not be more clear. We have a choice between communism and common sense.
The president says that communism, Marxism, and globalism have never worked.
And as long as I'm in the White House, the United States is not going communist in any way, shape, or form. We'll stop it. We're going to stop it. Stop this nonsense.
Meanwhile, President Trump urges Senate Republicans to get rid of the filibuster, saying it's the only way to end the government shutdown.
It's time. It's time. And we'll end up with 2-3 years, and we'll have this country so perfect.
And President Trump is now formally announcing that he's directing the Department of War to start testing nuclear weapons on what he calls an equal basis with other countries, mentioning explicitly both Russia and China.
Mari, thank you for that report. Now, senators are working towards a bipartisan deal to fund the government and turn the lights back on. NTD's congressional correspondent Melina Weisskopf joins us live with updates. Good morning, Melina. Good to have you with us today. We're in a historic government shutdown. The clock keeps ticking. Nothing seems to be changing, but where do negotiations stand now?
Well, some senators, including Republican leadership, is looking at a minibus. That's a bill that carries funding for multiple sections of government funding, like 2 or 3 agencies at a time. In this case specifically, they're looking at funding for the Agriculture Department, the Veterans Affairs Department, and the legislative branch. Now, Senate Leader John Thune said that this mini package should be nearing completion, and he says that will be the vehicle that carries the funding bill to reopen the government. So he's hopeful to get some movement on the Democrat side by, moving forward with this small minibus here. Now, the goal is to convince Democrats that Republicans are actually working to restore regular order when it comes to funding, which allows for open debate and input from both sides in the funding process. Now, that's something that Republicans have said frequently that they're working towards doing. So they're actually trying to show that they're working in good faith to get this done. Now, the whole Democrat leadership has not endorsed this minibus just yet, but Democrats will have a second lunch today, which is rather unusual. They usually meet at least once a week behind closed doors at lunchtime to talk about policy or strategy moving forward. Both parties do this every week. Democrats are having a second lunch, which indicates that things might be moving on the Democrat side now. They're also hashing out details for a final date for a new stopgap funding bill. Some want December, some want this funding to go through January, but considering, Steph, how long this shutdown will last, we don't know at this point. The patch of funding through January seems more likely at this point, but we could know more details about all of this today.
Interesting. So now one Democrat in the House, the only Democrat who broke ranks with his party to pass the Republicans' funding bill in September, is not seeking re-election. What more can you tell us about his decision?
Right. You're talking about Congressman Jared Golden of Maine. Now, he won Trump districts several times, but he announced that he announced in a news outlet called the Bangor Daily News that the increasing incivility, he says, and plain nastiness in American politics, along with his concerns about political violence, were the main reasons for why he doesn't want to run again in 2026. Now, we also noted that both parties have become extreme. Instead of his own party, I'll read you a quote from him. He said, "I fear Democrats are going down the same path. We're allowing the most extreme pugilistic elements of our party to call the shots." He said the ongoing shutdown is another example of how broken Congress is at this point. So these are all of the reasons why he's choosing not to run again in 2026, Steph.
Yeah, and that political violence and fear of it really is widespread. A lot of concern among those lawmakers on the Hill. Thank you so much for this update, NTD congressional correspondent Melina Weisskopf. And the federal government shut down, the longest in history, as you've been hearing, but its impacts are spreading to the skies. There's been a lot of updates lately on that.
I know. The Federal Aviation Administration says it will soon begin having to cut flights at major airports if they don't reach a deal on the government shutdown. Here's more on that.
The Federal Aviation Administration is preparing to cut 10% of flights at 40 major U.S. airports as early as Friday if the government shutdown continues. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says the move is about maintaining safety in the face of staffing shortages.
There'll be frustration. We are working with the airlines. They're going to work with passengers. But in the end, our sole role is to make sure that we keep this airspace as safe as possible.
According to the FAA, the reductions are meant to ease pressure on air traffic controllers who have now gone more than a month without pay.
But we do recognize that the controllers have been working fastidiously for the last 5 weeks with this huge burden over their head of lack of compensation. And we are starting to see some evidence that that fatigue is building in the system in ways that we feel we need to work towards relieving some of that pressure.
Duffy says they have identified 40 locations where controllers are under high pressure. He did not say which airports were on the list, but the plan could affect thousands of flights across the country, from New York and Chicago to Los Angeles and Dallas. Aviation analysts say that could mean as many as 1,800 canceled flights and more than 260,000 lost seats. Major airlines are trying to assess how the cuts will affect their operations. United Airlines says long-haul international and hub-to-hub flights will continue, but smaller regional routes could be impacted. Frontier Airlines warned travelers to book a backup ticket in case of cancellations. Secretary Duffy says he knows this decision will inconvenience travelers.
I'm concerned about disrupting people's travel. We're coming into a weekend, but we had to have a gut check of what is our job. Is it to make sure there's, minimal delays or minimal cancellations, or is our job to make sure we make the hard decisions to continue to keep the airspace safe?
Tens of thousands of flights have been delayed since the shutdown began because of widespread air traffic control shortages.
And staying with the government shutdown, how and when will it end? Joining us to discuss is Jeff Creer. He's a political analyst and the radio host of Ringside Politics on WGSO. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Jeff. Trump commented at his breakfast yesterday with the senators that the government shutdown hurt the Republicans in the election on Tuesday. Maybe he was just trying to strengthen his own case to the group to kill the filibuster to get the government open. But, in terms of your thoughts on the elections, the shutdown, and the filibuster and their interrelationship between all those things, love for your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's all interrelated. I mean, I do think the shutdown hurt the Republicans. Normally, shutdowns do hurt the Republicans because the media narrative is the Republicans are to blame and President Trump. So you saw that in some of the polling that the shutdown was an issue that Democrats used effectively to point fingers at Republicans and President Trump, even though Republicans are calling it the Schumer shutdown, and that there's a very good case that could be made that it's the Democrats that are the main problem for the shutdown. So initially, Democrats wanted to wait till after the No Kings rallies. Then the argument was, well, let's wait till after the election because we can use this as an issue in the election. And they did effectively. They won every major race across the country. It was a complete blowout victory for the Democrats. So now I think we're going to see movement toward an end to this very soon. The president's using the filibuster as a way to force Democrats to the bargaining table. The Democrats don't want to see the filibuster end because Republicans will be able to get through everything that they want. Democrats won't be able to stop anything. Now, the danger with that is that the next time the Democrats take control, they're going to be able to get through everything that they want. So it's really a desperation move at this point because nothing is getting done. But my prediction is that we are going to have some sort of movement this week. That's why you're hearing that the Democrats are meeting multiple times. So now that the election's over, we just heard about the traffic delays. I really do think this is going to come to a conclusion soon. The Democrats don't want to see the filibuster ended. They used to be in favor of it, but they're not now.
Well, that's what I'd like you to explore, Jeff. So in the Biden administration, it was the other way around, where the Democrats wanted to get rid of the filibuster. It's hard to know the Trump negotiation extreme to what he actually wants. Career senators seem to just be opposed to it on principle. But can you just re-explain, what is the filibuster and what are the potential, consequences if it were to go away?
Well, it is a tool that you can use in the Senate to slow down bills that are passed in the House by a majority. It requires a 60 vote hurdle to be able to pass legislation. The minority party can stop legislation through filibusters, so that you really need a consensus over 60 to get anything through the Senate. So by eliminating it, like they have for judgeships and other pieces of legislation targeted, you can have a majority party that has 51 seats pass legislation that passes the House, and the House can pass things, and they've just got a very small Republican majority. So back in the Biden days, you had people like Joe Manchin, who was firmly opposed to getting rid of the filibuster. And I think that's the problem the president has this time, because you've got like John Thune. He's not in favor of it. He's the Senate majority leader. So this is just a rhetorical tool. It's just a tool for the president to put pressure on the Democrats to come to the table and get this resolved. I think it's in everyone's best interest to get this resolved, because obviously these flight delays are major, major problems. And let's not forget, we already have 4,000 fewer air traffic controllers than we need now prior to this shutdown. So it's a real problem for air travel as we head into the holidays.
Absolutely. And Thanksgiving, of course, usually the peak travel weekend of the entire year. We're just 3 weeks out now, Jeff. So in your view, what's it going to take to get the government open?
Well, I think it's going to take people hearing from their constituents, the American people saying, hey, time for this thing to end. I think both parties are going to have to see that it's in their best interest, and Republicans want this to happen, so it's up to Democrats now. And there's going to have to be a negotiation about some of the demands that the Democrats have for spending, and possibly that's where a deal can be constructed for a later time, some of that spending that they're looking for to be agreed to by Republicans. So it's all a negotiation, and it looks like maybe now the time is for the parties to come together. We already have the longest shutdown in American history. It's not coincidental that both of these have happened, the second longest and the longest during the Trump administration, which is where you see, fierce Democrat opposition to his agenda. But now that these big events that the Democrats have been waiting for are over and the holidays are coming, and it could really be politically a problem to be seen as being behind this, I do think we're going to see some kind of resolution to this before too much longer. So keeping my fingers crossed, because this isn't good for the country for this to be continuing. It just shows that there's complete dysfunction in our federal government. And, I feel for the workers, and I know a lot of people I've been talking to that have been going without paychecks.
Yeah, that is the crux of the matter. And I think both sides grandstanding and negotiating a little bit. You mentioned that the Democrats wanted to wait to certain milestones and to get to the other side before they would negotiate. The Trump side saying, open the government first because this is a very complex issue you want to negotiate. Democrats essentially looking to change legislation that has already passed, the big, beautiful bill. So
right.
in light of the elections...
They're trying to get through what they couldn't get through in the one big, beautiful bill, which is the bottom line.
Yeah, so in light of, the elections potentially strengthening their hand, do they try to reconstruct what the health care should look like while the government's shut? Or do they both kind of get some sort of nod to their constituents that they won, and then they can actually, do the full work while the government gets opened?
Right. Yeah. Both sides are going to have to show their supporters that they won, that they got something from this. And, the Republicans are telling their supporters that, they're holding firm. They're not caving like they have in the past. And Democrats are saying that they're fighting for health care. They're fighting for people out there that need help, need government assistance, fighting for those that are on SNAP benefits, et cetera. So you're right. Both parties are going to have to feel like they're getting something out of this. And I think that's the point that we've reached because this has gone on so long, and because another milestone is coming, the holidays. And it's not in the interest of either Democrats or Republicans for this to be continuing on into the holidays. Because
you ruined someone's Thanksgiving, and they are not going to be happy about that. Well, Jeff, we really do appreciate all this analysis. Hopefully, by the end of the week, we'll be talking about what the other side looks like. Appreciate it. Jeff Carrera, thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. 7 New York City firefighters are recovering after a car explosion in the Bronx sent a massive fireball into the sky.
Yeah, the cause of yesterday's explosion is still unknown.
Authorities say the blast happened around 7 p.m. near Westchester Avenue after a trash fire spread to several vehicles.
Eyewitness video shows a flame burning near a parked vehicle moments before this huge explosion.
Fire Chief John Esposito says 5 firefighters suffered burns to their hands and faces, and 3 were admitted to the hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries.
Yeah, thankfully non-life-threatening. Esposito says the firefighters, they're awake, they're alert and speaking, but they are suffering from severe burns.
The death toll from a plane crash in Louisville, Kentucky has risen to 12, including a child. Federal officials are investigating after a UPS cargo plane crashed on takeoff from Muhammad Ali International Airport Tuesday. Governor Andy Beshear says the child who died was shopping with a parent at one of the businesses destroyed in the crash. Investigators say the plane lost its left engine during takeoff before crashing into nearby buildings. A massive fireball ignited on impact, setting off explosions and burning through a nearly half a mile of industrial property. The National Transportation Safety Board says both black boxes have been recovered, and a team of investigators will spend the week on site. Governor Beshear toured the crash site yesterday, along with Louisville Mayor Craig Greenberg and U.S. Congressman Morgan McGarvey. Mayor Greenberg said what they saw was devastating beyond words.
In another catastrophic accident in the South, an explosion at a chemical plant in Yazoo City, Mississippi has caused a major ammonia leak, and it forced residents nearby to evacuate. Governor Tate Reeves says state and local agencies are working together to contain this leak at the CF Industries plant, and that's a hydrogen and nitrogen product manufacturer. Reeves says early reports suggest the leak followed the explosion, and so far, fortunately, there are no deaths or even injuries. The company says all employees and contractors have been safely accounted for. State officials say air monitoring is underway to ensure public safety. Witnesses reported hearing a loud boom and then seeing this yellowish plume of smoke that rose over the facility.
We'll be keeping you updated there, certainly. Now, federal authorities are saying they've made new arrests tied to an alleged ISIS-inspired Halloween terror plot in Detroit.
That's right. According to the officials, quick coordination between agencies may have stopped a very dangerous and potential attack before it happened.
When Americans are threatened, we respond fast, focused, and together.
The New Jersey DA's office identified the suspects as Tomas Khan Jimenez Guazal and Milo Sedanet, both aged 19 and from Montclair. A third suspect from Washington State is also in custody. The FBI says a fourth suspect, Ayob Nasser, was also arrested in Michigan. The FBI says the suspects conspired to provide weapons and support to ISIS and plotted attacks on U.S. soil.
And investigators say the suspects had discussed traveling overseas to join the ISIS terror group. Court documents describe encrypted chats, weapons trainings, and searches for crowded Halloween events as part of the plot. The FBI says its agents monitored the group for weeks before they made the arrests. And New Yorkers have chosen their new mayor in an election that broke records and it set precedents. NTD correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has New Yorkers' reactions to the election results and their expectations for the mayor-elect.
New Yorkers have elected Sohran Mamdani to be their next mayor. Mamdani will be the city's first Muslim mayor and the second youngest in its history. Mamdani won with just over 50% of the popular vote here in New York City, while close to half of New Yorkers also voted for a more moderate alternative in Andrew Cuomo. I spoke with New Yorkers about what the election results mean for them and for the city.
But he has some type of energy where he has eyes that he just has that where we're going to go with this young guy. It's just like a young Obama. We had a president, a younger president. The energy. Now we have a mayor. And this is a great mayor. People got to realize, take a real good look.
Because I'm from communist country and I'm scared a little bit what is going on. So I escape from communists, and so to escape again, I don't think is right. But I hope he's not doing what he's promised. It's their choice. I don't know if they know what they are doing. So I escaped in 1989 when the communism was there, claiming they are socialist because they are hiding behind the socialism world. And communists, and then became dictatorship. I hope Zoran is not becoming this way, So.
I'm actually very happy and satisfied that, a change is coming. And I don't think a mayor can make it really a city like New York, really communist or socialist, as they said. I don't think so. And this is my opinion. And then maybe most people were afraid the fact it was too young, or it's young and inexperienced so far. But
well, we weren't pleased, but whatever.
We're scared of Trump too, so we just go with it and see what happens. That's all we can do. We hope for the best. I don't know about his idea about city running grocery stores, but whatever it takes, I don't know. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah, or a flat tax for everybody right across the board. Everybody pay the same, I think.
Everybody ought to be taxed equally. It remains to be seen how Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani will fulfill his promises of expanding by a massive amount welfare programs in the city. Any revenue through increased taxes would have to go through the state legislature and then be signed by the governor. And Governor Hochul has already expressed her opposition to any increased taxes. Reporting from New York City, New York, Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And as we just heard from Melina, the government shutdown is now the longest in U.S. history. And among the programs affected is the safety net known as SNAP, that more than 40 million Americans rely on to help with their food bills. Joining us now to discuss is Aaron Boxer. He's the founder and CEO of Diversified Education Services. Aaron, it's good to see you. I want to get your thoughts on the shutdown and the SNAP program.
Good to be here, Carrie, and thanks for having me. Look, shutdowns always expose how bloated and fragile our federal systems have become. SNAP is a lifeline for millions of families, and nobody wants people going hungry. Even as a young child in the 1970s, my mom collected what was called food stamps as a way to bridge the gap in our lives. Again, it was a temporary lifeline, but the program is also a perfect example of how Washington just keeps expanding benefits faster than it fixes. And costs keep going up. There's fraud, improper payments, as well as bureaucratic layers that make efficiency just impossible. So yes, we want to protect the families, absolutely. But we also need to be honest that a temporary shutdown isn't the crisis. The real crisis is a federal government that refuses to modernize programs like SNAP so they're sustainable, accountable, and then actually built to help people become self-sufficient and not permanently dependent.
Yeah, Aaron, I want to definitely come back and explore how the program might be broken and how to fix it. But in the short term, as you mentioned in your own experience, that people do rely on it for their nutrition. So I want to get your take on, do you think that something will be done specifically on SNAP, or do you think that the government will just reopen in its entirety first?
If history is any guide, Washington will reopen the government and then kick the can down the road again. Trump himself he's been imploring the Democrats to do that. Historically, in the past, they come up with some type of temporary solution. That's part of the muscle memory. But this is a moment that should force a conversation about SNAP reformation, because the trend lines just aren't good. The costs have ballooned, as I mentioned, enrollment spikes, and then during instability, verification it's a mess. There are smart solutions, and tying benefits to workforce development, cutting red tape for states, aggressively cleaning up the fraud. The problem is about political courage. Both parties know that SNAP is sensitive, so they avoid it. And the shutdown, it's giving them a chance to fix something instead of rubber stamping yet another extension. And the question is whether anyone will be willing to take this on.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point you bring up. If you think about Elon Musk coming in with Doge, he was, in the headlines every day, and he sort of ran out of town in one way or another. Now, your specialty, of course, is education. And I want to explore the parallels that you might draw between the nation's food and education industries in terms of how the government, gets involved?
It's a very good question. There is a huge parallel with both sectors. They're dominated by these massive federal bureaucracies who spend just mountains of money without delivering the outcomes that people deserve. And in education, we've, again, poured billions into federal programs, yet we're seeing this inverse relationship where the money goes up, but the reading and writing scores, they just keep falling. In food systems, we subsidize everything from corn to corporate distributors, yet still families struggle with access to nutrition. And in both cases, the people closest to the problem in education, talking about the local schools and the local communities, and then we also have the local farmers, they have the least amount of control. The problem, as usual, is government. They try and run everything from DC, and what that brings is inefficiency, dependency. It cuts down on innovation. Decentralization works. Local solutions work. One size fits all, it just does not.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point that you bring up. When you think about food and access, if I go to the grocery store, almost all the food is from California, yet I live on the East Coast. And there is a sort of oligarchical element that tends to happen because of efficiencies. But with efficiencies, is there a loss of quality? Do you see any of that in terms of, you mentioned the key word, I think, being access, both to education and food. Could you explore that a little further?
Sure. I'd love to see a future where food policy actually rewards health, efficiency, and also the innovation instead of bureaucracy. That means three things. First, you have to talk about the quality and incentivize fresh, real food instead of ultra-processed junk that right now the government subsidizes and they actually quietly prop up because it's cheap, but it's also extremely harmful, especially to our kids. We are I'll say the fattest generation. The amount of diabetes that we see in our communities is massive. Also, the second thing would be access. So partnering with community organizations, farmers markets, and private sectors. There are people who are already doing a better job than these federal programs. And then finally, regulation to streamline it. Small farms, small businesses, they get drowned in paperwork, drawing a parallel to education. That's what happens. You're just bogged down with all this paperwork. And these giant corporations, they can navigate that, delegate it down to their subordinates, and they're also armed with tons of lawyers. So if we want healthier kids, healthier families, and then a stronger economy, we need a food policy that supports independence and local solutions, not endless federal expansion.
Such an interesting parallel to explore the interconnection between education and food and health and longevity. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us. Aaron Boxer, great to see you.
Good to see you, Kerry. Thank you.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Kerry Dunst. If you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he's very optimistic about the Supreme Court case that is weighing the legality of President Trump's global tariff case. Bessent attended oral arguments at the High Court yesterday. He said that the Solicitor General presented strong and persuasive arguments while the plaintiff fundamentally misunderstood and misrepresented Trump's tariff goals. Trump has repeatedly emphasized that without his tariffs, there would be no national security. And the FAA is preparing to cut 10% of flights at 40 major airports across the country as early as tomorrow if the government shutdown continues. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says the move will ease pressure on air traffic controllers who haven't been paid in weeks now. The cancellations are expected to disrupt many Americans' travel plans. Thanksgiving right around the corner, of course, and Duffy's saying safety, though, must remain the top priority. And senators are working towards a bipartisan deal to fund the government, with some lawmakers looking at a bill that carries funding for multiple sections of the government. These would include funding for 2 to 3 agencies. The Republicans' goal is to convince Democrats that they are working to restore regular order in the funding to allow debate from both sides. Democrat leadership has not endorsed this bill yet, but they're having a second lunch today, and that could signal a movement for change. And 7 New York City firefighters are recovering after a car explosion in the Bronx sent this massive fireball into the sky. Officials say the blast happened last night after a trash fire spread to several vehicles. Fire Chief John Esposito says 5 firefighters suffered burns to their hands and to their faces. 3 remain hospitalized with very serious injuries. Those are this morning's top headlines. With that, Steph, over to you.
Thanks, Carrie. Now, the latest on the Trump administration's efforts to combat illegal drug trafficking by striking drug vessels off South America. Secretary of State Marco Rubio briefed lawmakers on Capitol Hill yesterday, sparking mixed reactions. Some say the strikes are saving American lives. Others say the tactics are too harsh and not transparent. NTD Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio briefing lawmakers behind closed doors on Wednesday about the recent drug boat strikes off the coast of Venezuela in the Caribbean and off the coast of Colombia in the Pacific. Now, this briefing was to leaders from both chambers of Congress and both parties. There's been a mixed bag of reactions from lawmakers coming out of the briefing saying that the Trump administration needs congressional approval for these strikes, while others say that the administration is saving Americans' lives.
The president really ought to be congratulated for saving the lives of young American people. He should be thanked by the many parents who won't even know that they won't have to bury kids prematurely. They're doing good work. They're doing it lawfully.
But the notion on the kinetic strikes without actually interdicting and demonstrating to the American public that these are carrying drugs and they're full of bad guys, I think is a huge mistake, and I think it undermines the confidence in the administration's actions.
The strikes target illegal drug traffickers bound for the U.S., and there have been several over the past few months, killing dozens of narco-terrorists on board. Earlier this year, the Trump administration doubled the reward for information leading to the arrest of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro to $50 million. They accused Maduro of organizing cartels to traffic drugs like fentanyl into the U.S. Meanwhile, Maduro is feeling the heat. The Washington Post is reporting that Maduro is contacting the Chinese Communist Party, Russia, as well as Iran, their regimes there, for military support in the form of equipment and closer military-to-military cooperation. NTD was unable to independently verify this, but last month, the U.S. sent its best aircraft carrier to the Caribbean near Venezuela. That's the USS Gerald R. Ford, which was moved away from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean, giving a clear signal about the Trump administration's priorities. President Trump says that the CIA is currently doing covert operations within Venezuela, though at this time there's currently no plans for land strikes on the South American country. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Thank you, Jack. And on that point, several senators have announced a vote today on a bipartisan war powers resolution. It would block U.S. military engagement within or against Venezuela unless that action has been authorized by Congress.
Yeah, this comes after reports that President Trump is considering land strikes inside of Venezuela, although Trump recently denied that intention of a land strike. And in a press release, Senator Tim Kaine said there is, quote, no authorization for the use of military force that gives President Trump the authority to launch military strikes inside Venezuela.
We'll keep you updated there. And the U.S. may be working on a plan to denuclearize with China and Russia. President Trump made the comments yesterday, shortly after Russia announced possibly resuming tests of nuclear weapons. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the Ukraine update.
We're maybe working on a plan to denuclearize the three of us, so we'll see if that works.
According to Trump, as of right now, the three nations are going in the opposite direction, suggesting they're competing in a nuclear arms race.
We're the #1 nuclear power, which I hate to admit because it's so horrible. It's such a horrible situation if it ever has to be used. Russia's second, China's a distant third, but they'll catch us within 4 or 5 years.
Trump made the comments just hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered officials to draft proposals to possibly resume nuclear weapons testing. Putin says the move is in response to statements made by Trump. Last week, Trump appeared to suggest the US might restart its own atomic tests.
Should the United States conduct such tests, Russia would be compelled to take appropriate reciprocal measures.
Putin is directing Moscow's defense and foreign ministries to analyze Washington's intentions and develop proposals to resume nuclear weapons tests. And in other Russia-related news, President Trump is set to meet with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban this week. The country's foreign minister made the announcement on Wednesday, saying Orban is set to travel to the US on Thursday.
A prominent point of the agenda will be the possibility of peacemaking in Ukraine. If an American-Russian preparatory work is successful, Hungary is ready to host a peace summit in Budapest.
Trump was already scheduled to meet with Putin in Budapest last month. But the US cancelled the meeting, suggesting it could be a waste of time without the necessary preparations. Another priority for Orban this week could be to convince the US to allow Hungary to continue purchasing Russian oil. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
And new concerns about China's reach and suppressing unfavorable media coverage. The Epoch Times and NTD, two American media companies known for exposing human rights abuses by the Chinese Communist Party, were recently denied access to key Asia Summit events.
That's right. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the incident, which happened at the recent ASEAN and APEC summits.
An Epoch Times reporter traveling with the White House encountered repeated roadblocks in accessing key press events in Asia, the latest in a pattern of interference linked to communist authorities in Beijing. Epoch Times is NTD's sister media. Both companies were ultimately denied entry to the ASEAN and APEC summits. They were the only outlets denied access despite having received pre-approved press credentials. This occurred after a series of twists and turns involving communications discrepancies, unlikely tech glitches, failed promises of press credentials, sudden reversal of statements, and passing the buck. Epoch Times editor-in-chief Jasper Fokkert said in a statement, "The Chinese Communist Party is an enemy to freedom of the press." He called it deeply concerning that the regime could influence international bodies like the United Nations and ASEAN to block access for what is now America's fourth largest newspaper. Headquartered in New York, the Epoch Times has long been a target of the Chinese regime, from threats and intimidation of advertisers to physical obstruction of reporters. In 2000, its first journalists in China were arrested, with several sentenced to a decade in prison. More recently, UN officials barred its reporters from entry in September. The campaign has intensified. Hackers impersonating Epoch Times staff have threatened U.S. agencies. The paper has received bomb threats, and an envelope containing white powder arrived at its headquarters in October. Travis Gilmore, White House correspondent for the Epoch Times, arrived in Malaysia 2 days before President Trump joined the ASEAN summit. Gilmore had pre-approved media credentials. However, when embassy and White House staff went to retrieve the credentials for media personnel, ASEAN officials informed them that Gilmore's profile needed updating. Repeatedly, Gilmore said he found himself in the same cycle, being told to come back and pick up the press pass later, only to find nothing when he returned. On October 26th, the ASEAN staff told Gilmore he got a pass approval, but the credentials never materialized. Mariotsu and Chen Lei, White House correspondent and videographer for NTD, faced a similar situation when they arrived at their hotel in South Korea ahead of the APEC summit. Inside the hotel, a reserved media table at the press filing center bore the NTD logo, but APEC staff members restricted their access and stated they didn't have the pair's credentials. The media liaison team blamed a mix-up for what happened and told Otsu they had found her media pass, only to walk back the statement within minutes, saying the earlier message was sent in error. Neither APEC nor ASEAN returned the Epoch Times request for comment on the article about the incidents. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And coming up, the closest supermoon to the Earth lights up the night sky across Latin America, dazzling locals, tourists, and photographers. We're going to have that and more. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Stephania Cox. It's one thing to build a retirement fund. It's another to make it last. Despite rising balances, a recent survey found 60% of savers worry about running out of money in retirement. With rising life expectancy, volatile markets, and inflation lurking, turning your 401k or savings into a sustainable income stream has never been more crucial. Joining us now live is Lawrence Sprung, the founder of Midland Financial and the author of Financial Planning Made Personal. Good to have you with us this morning, Larry. We've talked before about the importance of having a budget as part of your financial plan. What does that look like in retirement?
Yeah, so you need to have a plan to be prepared for retirement, because I think one of the biggest issues that people run into is when they're getting a paycheck while they're working, it's a little bit easier and smoother that if you overspend, it's a little bit easier to overcome that. But in retirement, where you have very much more fixed income stream, if you overspend at certain points, it makes it a little bit more challenging and difficult to overcome that. So you want to make sure, maybe start a trial run prior to retirement and start operating within your new retirement budget, and make sure that those are guardrails that you could stay within to ensure that you're not going above budget.
And what would some of those guardrails look like?
Well, I mean, you want to have a budget that is going to be in line with your retirement needs, right? So you want to make sure that you're in line, because like I said, if when you are working, if you go out on a weekend and you overspend on a nice dinner, or you do something, splurge purchase, you could just save a little bit more of your income the next week or the next month. But when you're in retirement, you're on a very fixed income stream, and it's going to be a little bit harder for you to do that.
Yeah, so having a budget is just the beginning. What are some of the risks retirees face, and how can they protect themselves from them?
Yeah, so I think what you want to do is you want to have a simple plan so your money will, last as long as you do in retirement. And, a good rule of thumb is to withdraw about 4% of your savings each year in retirement. And if you do it at that pace, it will give you a very strong chance of having that money last about 30 years or more. Now, we heard that 4% rule was dying when inflation was so high, but I think that was somewhat of an anomaly. So if you look at that 4% rule, it will probably give you enough to last for those 30 years. But keep in mind, taking out more too, and doing that early on can drain your account much more quickly, and may have effects long term.
So you've got a budget. Maybe you've got one or two income streams. Is that enough to buffer against potential changes in the market?
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, you have to look at how much do you need from income-wise to support your lifestyle based upon that budget that we talked about earlier. And as you mentioned, you definitely want to diversify your income sources, and you don't want to rely on one bucket. You don't want to rely solely on your investments. You don't want to rely solely on Social Security. But amazingly enough, in 2024, only 16% of retirees expected savings and investment to form their largest slice of income, and 43% expect Social Security to fill that bucket. So as you can see, the vast majority of people are heavily reliant on Social Security. So you want to build those multiple income streams, Social Security, your investments, maybe even do some part-time work early on and not fully retire. And that'll allow your reduced dependence on market returns or even, one income stream.
And many of these approaches are best started as early as possible. What can folks over 50 do to maximize their savings?
Yeah, so one of the things that they're not doing today is, many people are not taking advantage of maximizing their retirement plans. And, let's be real about this. People having to take care of their retirements on their own is somewhat of a newer phenomenon for this generation, because most people prior to them, their parents and grandparents were, working for companies, having large pensions, and they didn't have to think about these things. But, many many are not taking advantage fully, and those over 50 have the ability to even accelerate their contributions into their retirement plans. There's what's called catch-up provisions that allow them to put in significantly more than the average worker who's below the age of 50. So you want to make sure that in the year that you turn 50, if you are maximizing, understand you can even bump that up even further.
And what proportion of people do you think are really taking advantage of all the programs that are out there to benefit them as seniors?
I think it's probably low because there's not a tremendous amount of promotion and advertisement about them. So I think there are a lot of things out there and opportunities for folks that they're unaware of. You know, here in New York, there's a star rebate program for seniors. You know, in terms of real estate taxes. So if you have a home, you're over the age of 63, I believe, and your income is below a certain level, there may be credits that you can get towards your real estate taxes. That's just one small, example of what you're referencing. And if you don't know about it, you don't get it. So, you want to make sure that you're aware of things that are maybe state specific, community specific, and even federally specific for you.
And certainly seeking out the services of a professional financial planner may be one important step, no matter what stage you're at in planning your financial health in retirement. But how do you advise your clients in terms of balancing their 401ks with Social Security timing?
Yeah, so I mean, that really depends on each individual person. So we have people that we work with that have significant savings that it may make sense for them to delay Social Security until the age of 70, and financially they can do that. There are others that they don't have enough investments to support their lifestyle in retirement before the age of 70, and they have to start collecting at 62. So it's really important that you get an analysis or an evaluation of your own situation, see when it makes the most sense to pull the trigger on Social Security. And we can do side-by-side analysis for the families that we serve, showing them taking it at 62, 67, and even 70, and what will give them the most return from Social Security. Now, some of that is, not really fully known because we don't know how long people are going to live. But the whole idea is you want to get an idea of how Social Security will work for you and your family, and when might be the best time to start that process.
And best to plan for the best possible outcome, living to 100 or beyond. I know my granddad, I'm told, really did plan to live very long, and in fact, he really did live very long. It does happen. But bringing up behavioral aspects, how do advisors help clients avoid overspending or emotional investment decisions?
Well, I think that, in terms of age and the behavioral finance piece of things, I think the biggest one is actually entering retirement. I think that's a big challenge for many. I think if you talk to most people at certain points, they're like, hey, I really want to retire. I've just been working for a long time. But what they're not thinking about is, how am I going to fill those extra 40 plus hours a week in a meaningful way? So, what we've been seeing and what we've been advising a lot of folks is, don't just, do the hard stop and stop working, on a given day. Maybe start easing into that retirement, slowing down, going from 40, 50 hours a week down to 30 hours a week, and slowly make your way into that, and then adjust your budget accordingly into more of a retirement budget. And that'll give you an opportunity to fill those hours that you're now going to have available, and also get used to that financial aspect of things that's coming down for you.
That's right. So many changes, but study after study shows purpose, structure, and community are vital for long-term health in retirement, alongside that long-term financial planning. Thank you so much, Lawrence Sprung. Great to have you on today.
Thank you.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. In hospitals and doctors' offices across the U.S., Singers and musicians are helping patients.
That's right. The performances come amid several recent studies suggesting that listening to music can help alleviate pain. NTD's Andrew Thomas brings us more.
When you are fearless.
In the recovery unit of UC San Diego Health, nurse Rod Salasai helps patients manage their pain after surgery. Along with medications, he performs music ranging from folk songs to favorites like Somewhere Over the Rainbow. He says music and pain medication work side by side.
Once they got some pain medication, they started to relax, and then when you instill some music in between, then it's a different level of comfort that they experience.
Salasai says he sees music's impact on heart rate, blood pressure, and sometimes requests for fewer painkillers. Patient Richard Huang says the music helped him focus on recovery instead of pain.
I was expecting a typical nurse that just comes in and do his or her job, and that's it. And Rod came in here with a whole different attitude and atmosphere.
Your dreams must never die.
Salasai says he has performed for about 2,000 patients over the last 16 years.
I want to encourage them through music and give them hope that regardless of what's going on through their hospital stay and onwards, will be manageable.
Dutch researchers have found that music can draw attention away from pain. A study on 548 participants found tunes of all genres helped. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
So sweet, and what a lovely sound.
Yeah, you talk about nursing. My mother-in-law is a nurse, and they are the best people. And this nurse, though, going beyond just giving the medicine and making sure they're running everything according to the spec, he is really focused on helping his patients recover and heal mind, body, and spirit. It's all of that combined.
Nursing really is a labor of love, but here you can see it allows that connection on another level, and I imagine improves the satisfaction of the work as well.
And it's science too. It's not just, it makes you feel happy. I mean, there's the Mozart effect for children and in becoming able to learn with more focus. And then, of course, as we report on Shenyun in the coming months when they tour, the Chinese root for medicine and music in the character are the same. And so the Chinese traditional culture believes that music can actually be and is medicine.
Right, you're talking about the character, the way they write the word for music in Chinese?
That's right.
Yeah, it's all built in and that deeper meaning there.
Yeah, even their pentatonic scale is supposed to correlate to the 5 major internal organs of the body. So it's, but there we saw it actually is working in practice.
So much to know. And we just get to experience it right here, which is lovely. In other news, a sea turtle with a superstar name is making waves.
What a great segue from music to a female loggerhead named Swim Shady is back home in the Atlantic after months of recovery.
She was rescued back in August and treated at the Loggerhead Marine Life Center in Juno Beach after a boat strike left her badly hurt. After surgery, though, and antibiotics and a lot of TLC, the center's team helped her take those final flipper steps toward the surf.
That's right. Dozens of onlookers cheered her on. Look at that, as she made her slow crawl back to the water. It was a picture-perfect Florida day, sun and sand, and one very determined sea turtle heading home. Swim Shady. She's standing up. There she goes. Look at that. I wonder if they were serenading Swim Shady with guitar music to help her with her healing. It really is amazing. This facility, the Loggerhead Marine Life Center in Juno Beach, Florida, it's basically a hospital for turtles.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so, it's good to know that such a place exists for when turtles get injured. They can get their best turtle care,
And you can see why they would attract, people wanting to help them. So adorable.
Oh my goodness.
Look at those little fins.
And I love that there was like a whole crowd on the beach, like cheering her on as she made her triumphant
Yes.
crawl towards the water, right?
One for Mother Nature. Okay.
What do they say? Slow and steady wins the race.
Right.
You know?
They do. And speaking about nature, the beaver supermoon lit up skies across Latin America yesterday, captivating people, including tourists and photographers alike.
That's right. Yeah, this supermoon happens when a full moon coincides with its closest approach to the Earth. So it makes the moon appear larger, brighter, and this was the closest supermoon of the year.
November's full moon is commonly known as the beaver moon, which is a name linked to heightened beaver activity at this time of year.
Those beavers, and there are typically 3 to 4 supermoons in a year. The next and final supermoon of 2025 will take place just next month on December 4th.
Yes, and that's true. All of these moons, although they look quite similar, they do have their own flavor, often having different colors. Wow, you can see that amazing
beautiful.
Golden color there.
Look
but
at that.
The moon itself, of course, its size does not change.
We change, right? We're moving constantly, we're tilting, we're rotating. Yeah.
When you see the angle that you see it at changes according, when it's low on the horizon, it's going to be closer to us. And our brains are comparing it to the size of other objects around us. You can see like a miniature tree there, it seems like.
Wow.
But
yeah, vantage point really, perspective changes everything, doesn't it? You know, when you see a photo shoot, you see those people holding up those big white reflectors. That's basically what the moon is doing. It's just, it's bouncing the light from the sun, just like on a photo shoot, you know?
Yeah, it's making life on Earth here more beautiful.
But it does feel quite majestic when you get that. You know, when I sometimes come in the morning and there's a full moon and it's bouncing off the Hudson River right next to the George Washington Bridge, it's really those moments of solitude that, really, really touch you.
Such serenity, as they say. All right, if you've got any feedback on our show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at goodmorning@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we'd love the good feedback, but we'll take constructive criticism too. We want to make this show, this is your show. We want to make it great for you. And of course, for around-the-clock original news coverage, go to ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thank you for watching. I'm Kerry Dunst.
I'm Stephanie Cox. See you soon.